Dear Speaker Grosu, Your Excellency Ambassador Logson, Mr. Puchin, Honorable Minister Busu, and all of our distinguished guests and residents today. Good morning. I am so excited to be here with you today because over these next 2 days, we're going to talk about the future of Moldova like it has never been discussed before. But before we talk about your future, let's take a bit of a step back and talk about your past. 30 years ago, I joined the social protection team at the World Bank. In 1993, just after the breakup of the Soviet Union, my first trip with the World Bank was to all places here, to Moldova. We were working with the IMF to conduct one of the first assessments of Moldova's social protection system. I'm sorry. Maybe some technical assistance while we do. Okay. There we are, thank you. Now, some of you remember those days after independence well, but others of you, I'm judging from the room, are too young, and still others are guests from other countries. So I want you all to walk with me and imagine what I saw as we undertook that assessment. Again, it's 1993. Politically, Moldova is creating its own governing structure out of the ashes of the USSR. It's working on a new constitution. Numerous political parties are forming, and the presidential and parliamentary systems are being put into place for the first time. Already, Moldova is grappling with the Russian moves east of the Dnieper to seize control of the region, and we both see the substantial destruction that has been wrought by the separatists. The transition from the Soviet economic and political model is devastating Moldova. You and I see massive unemployment and hyperinflation, the struggles and failures of state-owned enterprises, and huge shocks to the agricultural sector. Moldovan families and children are suffering from the stressors not only of economic insecurity, but of an uncertain future. Well, naturally, the first thing that you and I look for is what kinds of supports the Moldovan system might have available to help those children and families. And that's when you and I discover that the Soviet planning model, which was built around full employment largely, doesn't have many elements of a modern social welfare and child protection system that are needed to support Moldova's needs. In particular, Moldova lacks a robust social work infrastructure. Social work and case management are the pillar of any effective social welfare system. Again, in 1993, there is very little available in the way of cash social assistance. There's no developed foster care system for children in need of family-based care, and limited availability of social services that newly vulnerable Moldovan families need. Instead, what do you and I see? The legacy of decades of investments in the primary Soviet intervention model. And what was that model? It was, in part, the substantial network of residential institutions housing children, people with disabilities, and people of older ages in often unimaginable conditions. On site visits, you see, along with me, horrific conditions that are crushing the children placed in these institutions physically and mentally. In fact, the conditions back then were so shocking that they inspired my own personal interest to commit to working in child welfare and protection. So, as we bring ourselves back to the present day, 2023, let's think about the costs of that legacy for today's Moldova. Let's first consider the children in those expensive and harmful institutions and the impact on them. The US and Europe recognized the harms of institutional care on children in the late 1800s and early 1900s, and developed a family-centered approach to social welfare throughout the 20th century. You can say that the family-centered approach in these countries isn't perfect, but it beat a system where a large percentage of institutionalized children died in care, with many of the rest broken for life. In 2017, the British medical journal, The Lancet, assembled a team of researchers to conduct a meta-analysis of global studies on the impact of institutional care on children. I was a member of that team, and we published our findings in 2019. That was exactly a century after a large conference of experts in the US in 1919 called for the elimination of institutional care and the creation of a foster care and adoption system. Our Lancet Commission found that even in the modern era, institutions present significant harm to children, regardless of where they are located around the globe. The children in them have physical delays, they have cognitive delays, they have emotional and social delays, they have delays in language, they are at significant risk of physical and sexual abuse, sometimes perpetrated by staff, sometimes by other children. Institutions tend to take in high numbers of children with disabilities or other vulnerabilities. Often, children who enter healthy will develop a disability because of their time in an institution. And it's not hard to see why the environment is so harmful. Let's look at the typical generic Soviet-era institution. There are 3 shifts of staff every day. Some of the staff stay employed for a long time and others come and go. Many of those staff have minimal training, and each one of them often has to care for many children, and in studies sometimes we found dozens of children for each staff member. Staff often rely on harsh physical punishment. Meals are at a set time, and the food often has little variety and poor nutritional value. Children sleep in dormitory-style rooms and with no personal space other than perhaps a locker. Infants are taught to potty train at the same time every day, and we could go on. But with all of that, one of the cruelest aspects of the system is the separation from participation in society. The children are not sent to school. They do not participate in community events. They do not recognize major life milestones. They do not learn basic life skills like how to shop or find a place to live. They do not learn very important rituals like how to date, how to participate in important religious observances, the joy of harvest festivals, or the warmth of hospitality in a household's casa mare. Still, as has been stated earlier, one thing that Moldova can be proud of is that you in Moldova understood this 15 years ago and thus became a regional leader in deinstitutionalization. In 1995, there were 17,000 children in institutions in Moldova. Through a determined set of joint efforts by government, international organizations, and civil society, you brought that number down to 685 in 2021. That's incredible. In 1995, that same start, there were zero children placed in family-based care because foster care did not exist. In 2021, there were 14,515 children in family-based care. Just remarkable. In 2001, you had 67 large-scale institutions for children. Today, there are just 15. Every Moldovan district has a gatekeeping commission in place to prevent the placement of children in the remaining institutions and to secure the best possible care for them. This incredible progress is what has made Moldova a leader in the region It may not be easy to see that, but it's true. It's transformed Moldova into a demonstration country for others considering how to do all of the hard work to progressively reduce reliance on institutional care. So let's celebrate that remarkable and ongoing success, but also recognize that today, here, together, we have the opportunity to pave the way for something much bigger and long-lasting. A paradigm shift in how Moldova will approach the care and protection of its children and pave the way for European accession. Since this is a conference about economics, let's talk about capital. Economists refer to different kinds of capital. There's financial capital. There's physical infrastructure. Capital can come in the form of natural resources and energy. And most important for us in this room, there is human capital. The World Bank defines human capital as, quote, the knowledge, skills, and health that people accumulate throughout their lives, enabling them to realize their potential to be productive members of society. Now let's take that technical definition and make it real for Moldova. Moldova needs people to work the fields, in the factories, in services, in retail shops, in restaurants. That is human capital. Moldova needs the teachers and educators to train those future workers. That is human capital. Moldova needs the physicians, nurses, and many others in the healthcare system to keep its population healthy. That is human capital. And Moldova, like other countries, needs to reduce social ills like crime, substance abuse, physical and sexual abuse, and others. That is building and protecting human capital. We have talked for many decades in international development about what countries need to build capital for economic growth. And of course, that includes roads and energy and communications and transport and a host of other variables. Well, now there's a huge upswelling in global interest in what is needed to build human capital. Where does Moldova sit? Well, from 2010 to 2020, Moldova's Human Capital Index, which is collected by the World Bank, did improve from 0.56 to 0.58. But while that improvement is welcome, it's important to mean, what does that 0.58 mean? It means that Moldova's children will only be 58% as productive as they would be if they had complete education and full health status. 58%. So let's think of human capital as being built on a stool with 3 legs. Moldova has been, like many countries, quite typically, focusing its public investments in 2 critical legs of the stool that I just mentioned, health and education. Those 2 legs are absolutely essential components of building Moldova's economic present and future. Education from early childhood, for example, is strongly correlated with higher lifelong earnings. Physical and mental health also help to improve productivity. But the 3rd leg of the stool is nowhere near as strong as it should be, and that is the social welfare leg. It's not as strong in many ways because of the weak systemic capacity Moldova inherited at independence 30 years ago, but also because Moldova has had limited resources since independence to address so many needs. That 3rd social welfare leg includes social protection, social services, and child protection. Now, why is that 3rd leg so important? Because that is precisely the leg that deals with all the problems children face outside of schools and hospitals and inside their households and communities. Most of the research from the United States and Europe show that educational performance in schools is not solely dependent on how you design the curriculum, improve the teaching, or enhance the technology. Much of that performance is also related to what happens in the child's environment when school is out of session. Evidence tells us that addressing problems in the household and strengthening families is directly correlated to improved academic performance. For example, the City Connects program, which I spotlight from many because it has been collecting just incredible data, found that when it connected vulnerable students with a social work case plan and referrals to social services, students had far better grades, were less likely to be absent, they had much lower dropout rates, and they scored higher on standard achievement tests. The improvements for the most marginalized children were stunning. In the words of City Connects, life outside of school affects what happens in school. The same goes for health. Child maltreatment and neglect have been tightly correlated with poor physical development, cognitive delays, emotional and social delays, and social problems such as substance abuse. The effects of what happened to children are lifelong and include cardiac problems, pulmonary disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, cancer, and other chronic health problems. Allow me to make one more point about social welfare. There's increasing recognition, and I think this is of importance for Moldova and your reform direction. There's increasing recognition by social protection experts around the world that cash alone is not sufficient to address the spectrum of vulnerabilities that children and families face. While cash assistance can alleviate stressors on a household, it cannot address psychosocial needs, the needs of children with disabilities, violence and abuse in the household, and other risks and adversities. There are a number of really and quite recent exciting studies from around the world that shows you get a bigger payoff by combining cash transfers with care services than you do from either cash alone or care services alone. We're calling this approach globally cash plus care, and it's becoming a centerpiece of World Bank and UNICEF programming around the world. So you really want that third leg of the stool, social welfare, delivered through cash plus care, to improve parenting practices and to prevent abuse and neglect as early as possible to build what? Human capital. Human capital in Moldova. In short, we should not just be thinking about institutions during this conference. They are the entry point to something bigger. We should be talking about an exciting investment in a shift in Moldova's social welfare system that supports all of Moldova's children at risk, and that in turn becomes a pillar of Moldova's future approach to social welfare. This paradigm shift can be the foundation of how Moldova can align its social policies with the European Union. And the paradigm shift is quite consistent with what you're about to hear from the minister and from others about the exciting directions that this government is about to take. In 2019, the European Commission established a child guarantee that seeks to ensure that all children have access to quality education, health, and social services, with countries also aiming to end reliance on the legacies of institutional care. The EU is not doing this just because they respect child rights. They do. The EU is doing this because it understands that children are their future, their human capital, and that children need a holistic spectrum of supports to thrive. It is time for Moldova to step on that train. Before I get into the key elements of the investment case, I want to ask us all a question. Why so much talk about the importance of family? What do families have to do with human capital? Well, dear colleagues, the concept of family is so embedded in what we are and who we are as a species that we often take it for granted, and we don't often think about it when we develop and implement our policies. We have evidence of the critical roles families have played in early human history. We see it from cave paintings, burial mounds, and other evidence that families for untold millennia, thousands of years, have served to socialize children, to provide collective protection from enemies and predators, to work together to hunt and gather resources, to regulate sexual reproduction, and to provide family members with a social identity. Family runs deep in our genes and in who we are. As I so often say, children are born wired to be in families. The more nurturing and protective those families are, the more likely a child is going to be able to thrive. Our modern societies and markets have taken on some of the functions of family, such as defense, but they have not baked family out of the child. So as you look at the future of your social welfare system, you need to look at that third leg of the stool, social welfare, right? And understand that that leg can only be strong if Moldova's policies work to ensure that Moldovan families are strong. So a team of economic experts has taken all of these grand ideas and converted them into a concrete investment case for Moldova. The case they will be presenting to you shortly is based on the assumption that Moldova will increase its investments in a minimum package of services for children and families that is consistent with the direction of the Ministry of Labor and Social Policy's intentions for future reform. I'm not going to spoil their upcoming presentation by telling you the details, but I just have to share with you one important number they came up with as a teaser. An internal rate of return is a common measure for determining the profitability of an investment. The economists you will be hearing from are going to show you later, through a combination of cost savings and education and health returns, that investments in Moldova's minimum package of services will yield a discounted internal rate of return of 16.6%. That may not mean much to some of you, but I spent part of my career working in private finance. An internal rate of return of 16.6% would immediately generate the interest of a private investor as a high level of profit worthy of a closer look. So let's take that closer look these next 2 days. And let's also agree that Moldova can't secure these returns alone. These are challenging macroeconomic times that are occurring against the backdrop of regional turbulence due to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and other global factors. Moldova will need external support. I'm going to close by making that pitch to some of you here in the room. So to my colleagues here at the World Bank, what is being proposed today is squarely aligned with the bank's human capital project, and the reported IRR is more in and of itself to justify the cost of borrowing. I can't help but wonder if the minimum package that the government is envisioning might not be included in that dialogue with the World Bank. To the European Commission, investing in the minimum package of services will address your observations and your opinion on Moldova's application for membership in the EU, on the need for deinstitutionalization. But more than that, Moldova also needs to set in motion measures to achieve the recently adopted EU child guarantee. Once Moldova joins the EU, it will also have access to structural funds that will further allow it to develop its social welfare system. Investing in Moldova's minimum package is a strong foundation for Moldova's future participation in Europe. To USAID, I want to recognize your important investments in this objective, which are consistent with the US government's action plan on children in adversity. Your support through changing the way we care for a collective impact approach, that means all of us, a collective impact approach, is helping to ensure that the government of Moldova has the support it needs to make this program a success. You have also spearheaded the development of tools and resources Moldova and other countries need to strengthen the care and protection of children. I encourage you to keep up this critical momentum in Moldova, and in particular, those efforts that bring all of the key stakeholders together, everyone in this room and those who are unable to attend. To UNICEF, your social policy and child protection teams around the world are seizing on the cash plus care agenda. You have a unique mandate before the government regarding children and years of experience of working with Moldova to strengthen its child protection system. I urge you to continue your important investments in this direction in Moldova. And for the rest of you in this room, too many to call out by name. You are here for a reason. You have seen how hard Moldova has fought to change its system from the one I witnessed 30 years ago. You can make things even brighter for the next 30 years. Whether you are a parliamentarian crafting laws, or a government official overseeing policy, or a multilateral, or embassy, or donor providing resources, or an NGO providing services, or an expert providing advice, whoever you are, you have a role to play in strengthening Moldova's human capital for years to come. You have a role to play in building that third leg of the stool. With your help and resources, we can work together to create a system that supports the Moldovan children of today to become the European citizens of tomorrow. It has really been an honor to speak with you, and I wish all of us success during the remainder of the conference. Thank you very much.